passes here. Choice. All right, I'd like to call to order the Salem-Keizer Area Transportation Study. It is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. And we will do a roll call. Teresa, can you do a roll call for us for the different jurisdictions? We have it on the record here.
So I have Anna Hansen. Here, sorry. Barbara Clark.
And then
Mayor
Keizer.
Kevin Cameron.
Here, Marion County.
Maria Hinojosa, School District.
I'm here. It's Hinojos.
Sorry. Sadie's not here yet. Trevor Phillips.
Here,
Sarah is.
Sarah is here. Okay.
Steve.
Yeah, Steve Horning, Mayor Turner,
Present.
and then Lyle Morhurst.
Present.
Okay, County. And then let's go around the room with staff members.
Lonnie Radke, Marion County.
Teresa Wizenhut, COG SKATS.
Ray Jackson, SCAT staff.
Kim Sappenar, SKATS staff.
Mike Jaffe, SCAT staff. Steve Dobrinich, SCAT staff.
Sheila Hanson, City of Salem staff.
That's Schmidt, City Frosted School Coordinator.
Okay, and then on the screen, we have Ashley Briers.
Hello, I'm Ashley with SWA.
Welcome. And we have Shofi Azum. Sorry, my bad pronunciation.
No, Shofi Ul Azum. I'm with Chariots.
Thank you. Brandon Williams.
Brandon Williams, ODOT planning staff.
And let's see. Scott McClure. There we go. Hello, Scott.
Right.
Oh.
Okay,
Hi, Scott. We couldn't hear you.
yeah.
Oh. See you there.
And then Tammy Kunz.
Tammy Kunz, Keizer Community Diversity Engagement Committee, and Jacqueline Green is here with Greater Northeast Keizer Neighborhood Association.
All right, thank you. And we have a square that is marked KLP. Could you please let us know what that acronym is?
Hello, I'm just a citizen. My name is Kirsty Pizzuto.
Kirsty, could you put that in the chat for me, please?
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks.
Yeah, Trevor, yeah, we did. Okay, did I miss anybody?
Yes.
And then we have two distinguished guests, the mayor of Salem
Chris Hoyt, Mayor of Salem.
and the mayor of Almsville.
Angelica Ceja.
All right, thank you all very much. So now that everybody knows who's in the room, let's go to our first order of business, which is to approve the minutes of the policy committee from January 23rd, 2024. Were there any additions or corrections that needed to be noted? There's Sadie. She's here. Hearing none.
Madam Chair,
Oh,
I'll move that we approve the minutes from June. Second.
So I'll move Commissioner Cameron, seconded Anna Henson for approval as presented. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Public comment this time is provided for members of the public to address the policy committee. Are there any members of the public that who would like to address the policy committee today? Okay, we'll move on then to item D, which is the amendments to the SKATS federal fiscal year 2024-2029 TIP. Steve Dobrinich, you are up, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I just shared on the screen, and this is an attachment that's in the packet as attachment D. So there are three full amendments for the group to review, and the request is to have the policy committee approve these amendments. So I'll just go through these one by one. The first one relates to the Pringle Creek Path connection. And the request here is to increase the project cost that's listed in the STIP to add the local overmatch to the project. Essentially, well, we saw this, I think it was in December, it came through to the policy commission previously and was approved as a project. However, the person who entered into the STIP didn't include the local overmatch that was supposed to be there. So this is just a correction to that. So it looks like a project cost increase, but in reality, it's the actual cost of the project. We're just correcting what's in the STIP. And so the addition is of about $1.5 million in local City of Salem funds. And that goes along with the pretty sizable grant of from the Oregon Communities Path program that the city received for this project.
I just had a question. Remove the Oregon Community Paths funds from right-of-way phase?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of that?
So there's three phases in the project. There's at least in this given project, there's a preliminary engineering phase, there's a right-of-way phase and a construction phase. And so when we realized that the local funds, the additional local overmatch needed to be added, I worked with Salem staff and they indicated that they thought it would work a little bit better if the federal funds were on the other two phases and on the right-of-way phase. So I'm not sure if Julie has anything else to add to that, but essentially it's still the same amount of federal funds. It's just distributed between the phases a little bit differently.
In the past, so just moved to another purpose on the project. Your past money.
Yeah, the total amount of paths funding remains the same. It's at 6 million. It's just on the efficiency of delivery. It makes, because the right-of-way phase is so small, it's easier to just keep it in the PE and construction phases.
Any other questions on this update?
Madam Chair, I'll move that we approve resolution 24-2 for the Pringle Creek Path connection.
Second.
Draft resolution 24-2 has been moved by Commissioner Cameron, seconded by Councilor Phillips. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. Go on to the next one, Steve.
Okay, so this one is an Oregon Transportation Network project. It's an ODOT transit section pot of funding, and they are requesting to increase the project estimate by about $400,000 to essentially match their FTA allocation. It doesn't have any bearing on SKATS funding, so we got recommendation from the TAC to move this along for approval. And I guess while I'm talking, I'll just go through the next one as well, if that's okay. That is approval of a decrease in project costs of transit, about $480,000 of the apportionment of some formula transit funds. This one is SAM-TD funding. It actually wrote Salem as the project sponsor there. It should say SAM-TD at the top of this one. So that's my mistake. But essentially, my understanding is the decrease has to do with how the funds are, basically how the federal funding process works, where early on in the FIT development process, we use an estimate to program some of these formula funds. And then when the actual apportionment takes place, sometimes the funds are greater or less than what is actually initially estimated. So in this case, there's a reduction, and this project was programmed several years ago. So that's why the reduction takes place. So that's kind of the summary on 23-2. or 24-3 and 24-4, if there's any questions on either of those.
Can you just clarify what you said about the title was wrong? Where is that?
Oh, yeah, here on this screen that I have up there, so it's, it should say project sponsor SAM-TD instead of Salem.
Okay. Transit district.
Yeah.
I don't, but in the packet, both, say work type transit. Where am I not seeing it?
It's in the attachment is where the error is.
Oh, gotcha. There it is. Under project sponsor, okay. The last, okay, right there. So this will be as for 24-4, the project sponsor and Salem-Keizer Transit.
So the radio, make a motion to approve resolution 24.3 and 24-4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Commissioner Cameron, seconded by Councilor Phillips to approve 24-3 and 24-4 friendly amendment that 24-4 is as corrected to show project sponsor as Salem-Keizer Transit District. Mover accept
Yeah,
that
I
correction.
thought that was the motion, yeah, okay.
And the second, accept the correction. Councilor Phillips? Can't hear
Yes.
you.
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously. All right, that takes care of the tip amendments. Go back to page 1. And now to the main event, which is the discussion on MPO structure. Appreciate everybody being here today. This has been a bit of a great deal of conversation. So the way we're going to start out, just want to acknowledge that for people who are on screen, that Councilor Rutledge, right? No. Della is here. Yes. From Almsville. Yes. So I want to make sure everybody knows that because she came in after introductions, and then Eddie Carney from the Salem-Keizer Transit is now present as well. Anybody else that came in after we did introductions? So people on screen will know. Okay. Anybody new on the screen? Teresa, okay, we're all good. Okay, so everybody knows who's here and there. So what we're going to do is we have the memo giving some background information where we can review once again to make sure that we all understand what the conversation is about and how we're going to structure the conversation today. Understanding that there is no timeline, no requirement to make any sort of motion, resolution, so forth. No timeline that has been imposed as we understand it from USDOT to make any changes. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so we have no time pressure here. And then right off the top, I would like to ask the mayor of Salem, Mayor Hoy, and Mayor Sehad to then speak to the group about their point of view on the voting structure and so forth. And I want to apologize. Early on, we've been having a lot of conversation about Salem and so forth, and Sani has been in these meetings, listening, and she's the consummate professional. Been a pleasure working with her all these years on MWAC, and to invite the city of Almsville to speak on their own behalf as well. So I'm delighted that both Councilor Sani and Mayor Seha are here today to have this conversation. So Mike, do you want to lead off with a little bit about, again, make sure we're all on the same page on the structure and setting the table for discussion, and then I will invite both mayors to address the group.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from this slide, and by the way, this slide was sent to all the people online too, so they have digital copies.
I just emailed it to Trevor, Sadie, and Maria.
Okay. So you should look in your email for that, but it'll be on the screen as well. And you have handouts for this meeting, but also to take away, of course. We will be talking about in the future, which we probably will. So the purpose today is to review the options for the MPO Policy Committee membership and voting. It's also to understand changes to federal law on board composition that happened in 2021. And to understand the redesignation process for MPOs when they do change their board composition. So those are our probably three major takeaways of understanding and discussion. So prepared a staff memo and it covered these items. One, just to get everyone on the same page. The 2020 census came out and the Salem urban area was expanded. It expanded to add Almsville to the SKATS area. Now to actually add, so the boundary will expand, so the planning area will include Almsville. But then there's a separate step to add Almsville to the SKATS board and be part of the listed in the cooperative agreement. If they are added, like listed as a member to the agreement and to the bylaws. Now that's a process called, if there's a process called redesignation. So we were designated in 1987 as an MPO. When we added Turner, we added them by an amendment. It's a pretty simple amendment, did not require redesignation. But if we change the board compositions in some other way, like voting members, we have to be redesignated, and I'll get to that later. I'm also going to cover MPO board structures in Oregon and other states so you can see the variety of compositions that are out there, kind of educate you about there's more than one way to form a board. There's many ways as far as number of votes, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to go a little bit over the August policy committee discussion. It's also in the memo. We could talk a little bit about facilitators and some public input we've received up to now. And then at the very end, even though I made it attachment A, the most important thing people want to look at was just the kind of straw man membership and voting options. And I call them straw man because they're not the staff recommendations. They're just options for you to think about, pull apart, put back together, however you want. But just a way to start of here are some options to look at and get the ball rolling for discussion. So as I mentioned, we have a cooperative agreement and there's federal regulations about that. The cooperative agreement it exists, and then if we have to be redesignated, that agreement has to be updated and it has to be an agreement by at least 75% of the existing MPO area population, including the largest incorporated city, which includes Salem. So that agreement has to have Salem and it has to have at least that 75% population. As I mentioned, the Salem urban area was expanded to include Almsville. You don't have to be redesignated when adding members as a result of that expansion. So that's what happened in Turner. They were added in 2003. It was just a simple amendment. Almsville, we don't have to redesignate if that's the only change. They're just added like Turner. No other change to the board composition except they are one more added member. However, you have to be redesignated by the governor when you make substantial changes to the proportion of voting members on the existing MPO or substantial changes to the decision-making procedures established under the MPO bylaws. So you'll see later there's options for things like weighted voting and or other processes you could consider. And if you make changes to that the governor has to be approval of those changes. So this is something we showed last month, but I think a lot of you know this. This is the general composition of the SKATS planning area. We don't have an exact planning boundary yet. That's still being finalized through this process, but just based on the existing boundary, and it won't change that much. We're an area of 271,000 people plus. Almsville will add about 4,000, so let's just say 275. And the Salem city limit is about 175,000 people. So they're 65%. You can see Keizer's 14%, Marion County's 19%, and then Polk County and Turner are around 1% each. So there were changes, recent changes in 2021 about when an MPO is redesignated. Even designated the first time. So here's the language. And that was added to the Infrastructure Investment Act of 2021. In designating officials or representatives under paragraph 2, this is something else, don't worry about paragraph 2. Subject to the bylaws or enabling statutes of an MPO, some states have enabling statutes. The Metropolitan Planning Organization shall consider the equitable and proportional representation of the population of the metropolitan planning area. So that's the law that was added. It's in effect right now. And as you know, many of you know, when Congress passes a law, the federal agencies have to write regulation and on that, explain that law, how it should be implemented, etc. So there are proposed regulations with hopefully more specification scheduled for May 2024. How much it'll touch on this one issue, I don't know. It'll be a rather broad regulations, but hopefully it'll have a little more guidance toward what they want MPOs to do.
When do you think that's coming out?
Well, we think May 2024. Federal Highway puts out a schedule when they think they're going to release regulations, but things get delayed sometimes, so.
And just to clarify, that's proposed rulemaking. So May is when the proposed rulemaking will be released. So you have comments. Then you have comment period, and then you have them taking time to consider the comments.
Yeah, so it may take 6 months to a year before the final regulations are done.
But you would have a sense, sorry, I shouldn't speak up, I'm not a member.
Mayor?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
You would have a good sense of where the direction they're headed, where you might not know the specifics, is that true?
We would have a sense because they're proposed rules, so hopefully they give some detail. But there were other changes, so that might be just one little part of each. Yeah.
Let's see.
Now, when I asked Federal Highway, can they give us any more information about what this might look like? They did send something that's in your packet. Like lots of laws, there was a House report that said, here's how we think the law should be changed. And that's what I'm showing on the screen. That House report had kind of 3 provisions in there. The first one is generally what the law says, that equitable and proportional representation. There was a savings clause that didn't make it into the law. However, it did. I'm going to go back a slide here. You'll notice it says for the first time in the law, meaning that the law says you're a brand new MPO. When you have to consider this when you're a brand new MPO for the first time being designated. The House report had a 3rd provision saying, notwithstanding the saving clause, the requirements of the equitable and proportional representation will happen to any MPO redesignated under paragraph 6, which is the redesignation parameters. So while we don't know for sure, it's possible the regulations may also say when being redesignated, you have to consider fair and equitable. All we know right now is that the law is what the law says in that previous slide. And we don't know how it's going to exactly be promulgated to existing MPOs, right? So that's a bit of a question mark. But I think we're clear what the law wants us to do as far as the goal of that. Okay. Is everyone clear on that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about equitable representation and just a few slides about definitions. So what is equitable? There's Federal Highways definition about fairness and mobility and accessibility to meet the needs of all community members. It's a fairly general description. There are lots of other things out there to talk about what is equity as far as transportation. There's this project screening guide that talked about access to opportunity, healthy environment, affordable mobility options. And I mentioned the Federal Highway regulations to implement the law may have more about how that should be applied to MPO boards specifically. Now in our own long-range plan, goal 4, we talk about equitable, essentially equitable. And I'll just cover a little by my screen here. The goal of the long-range plan is to have a system that meets the needs of our users of the regional transportation system, and the benefits and burdens of the system are not disproportionately distributed. Steve sent me the Corvallis MPO that had a nice equity goal in there too, and that one talks about eliminating barriers, access, safety, affordability, health outcomes for experienced by people of color, low-income people, older adults, people with disabilities, and other historically marginal communities. So you can say equity can be a very short definition, it could be a very long definition, depending on what you want to include. Proportional representation is another issue that you saw in the law. So from a 2017 report by Federal Highway, it had this quote saying, board composition is not, at that time, was not determined by federal law or regulation. Now, not quite true. It does say who should be members, but it doesn't say who can't be members. So there are lots of board compositions that include things like, well, they include school districts, they include tribes, they include airports, shipping ports, private businesses, citizen members. So board compositions, there's a whole report about how many kinds of boards you can have. It does, and it doesn't say, federal laws don't say, you know, one representative per jurisdiction, or 2 or 4. And so there's been a variety of different compositions, and I'll show you that in a minute. And another thing to bring up is, I think this law and some of the language of the law might have been spiked by something that's happened in Houston, where in that multi-million population area, the counties of Houston and Harris County, which are the most populated areas in that area, only had 18% of the board members on that board. So they felt very misrepresented on that board. And they had to do a proposition for the city of Houston to force Houston to try to take action. And I think the action was, if you don't change the board composition, we're leaving the board. There's a whole story about that, but that's quite a prominent discussion in Houston about fair representation on these boards. In this case, it was a board that does transportation, and also flood and other things. But that's something that's happened in the last couple of years. So proportional representation, you know, when I look it up in Wikipedia, it's mostly talking about electoral systems and things like that. There's nothing quite like what we need for our board composition. So I kind of adapted the Wikipedia one to what it may mean. This is just my terms, but board composition under which subgroups of a population, or maybe it's jurisdictions, are reflected proportionally in the MPO board. And like I said, the federal highway regulations that come out, maybe they'll shed some light on this some more. Now getting to what boards look like, the whole report, but I'll just I picked out a few things for you to know. Most boards of our size are in the kind of 14 to 17 member size. Well, most of them are made of city and county representatives, and ODOT has to be on the board in public transit. There's so much variety, as I mentioned earlier. There are 24% of MPOs have rotating seats, and that's usually for larger boards that have lots of smaller cities on that. So it's unwieldy to have 2 bigger boards, so they rotate seats. 36 MPOs have weighted voting in their process, in their bylaws. So it's usually not something that they go for a regular vote, but it's like a backup. So if they can't get enough agreement on a regular vote, they say usually a call for a weighted vote. I have a few examples here. So like I'm saying, there's lots of variety of how we can do this for ourselves. Then there's also plenty of MPOs that have non-voting board seats. And you can see from the slide, 53% have non-voting board seats of all these types. And I highlighted things like the DOTs are often not voting. They're on the boards, they have to be on the boards, or at least a state representative. Public transit authorities, surprisingly, not voting. Some municipal elected officials, they're not, this might be some that are voting and some that are non-voting. Might be a combination of the two. County commissioners sometimes and school districts. So like I said, this is a report that MPOs self-reported on themselves. What's your composition look like?
Can I ask a quick question? Thank you, Chair Clark. You mentioned that municipal elected officials might be a combination of voting, non-voting. Is that like if a city had two folks there that were both elected, one might not vote? And then I'm wondering, would county commissioners potentially be the same, or public transit authorities where they had two seats on the MPO, but one was a non-voting member? There was just
I suppose it could be any of those combinations. For example, the city of Bend, you look at their bylaws, they have 3 members from the city of Bend, but they only have 1 vote amongst them. And ODOT gets 1 vote and Deschutes County gets 1 vote. So they're still members, but they get 1 vote.
I'm so proud of that single jurisdiction.
Yeah. And probably anything else you can imagine. Maybe a small city would be divided, but they are divided for discussion, but they're voting members. You have to look at all those things to understand what people are doing. But getting back to our cooperative agreement. So here are our current members on the left-hand side. All have 1 vote per member. And then in our cooperative agreement, we have provisions for unanimous votes. Not on everything, but on 2 documents. So as we just found out, we just had a vote about resolutions. Does it have to be unanimous? Although that's the thing we want to clarify in our bylaws eventually when we open it back up.
So just to say really, really clearly, the votes we just did do not have to be unanimous.
Right.
All of these resolutions we just did, they are majority rules. But they were all unanimous because everybody on here agreed that they were well constructed and they were consistent. So I really want to emphasize this because this has been a source of tremendous misunderstanding. There are only 2 documents in our bylaws that require a unanimous vote based on how this organization was established. And they are the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan. That's it. Everything else is majority rules. However, in my experience, and I've been around here for a little while, I do not recall a single resolution in recent memory that weren't one of those 2 that weren't all unanimous. Just because they were regulatory, or they were advancing something regarding a project development, a project phase. And those generally are so well constructed that there isn't a lot of discussion on them. They were presented by the jurisdiction, run through the technical advisory committee, and they arrive at the policy committee for that one last look. Did we get it right? Mike, did I miss something there?
No, I would agree with what you just said. So, as the chair said, unanimous votes are required for the long-range plan and the 4-year TIP. When they developed the cooperative agreement back in '87, they said, well, what happens if we don't have a unanimous vote? What's the process? So the cooperative agreement, and this is attachment B, I believe.
Yep.
Attachment B in this packet has a nice graphic that shows what happens, flow chart sort of thing. They did, and actually there were several versions of this when you go back to the '80s. But it talks about how if there's not a unanimous vote, the issue, let's say it's the long-range plan, would go to the boards of Marion County and Polk County, Salem-Keizer Transit District to get the board discussion, see if the board as a group wants to approve the document. And then assuming all 5 eventually come to some decision, they can do a uniform adoption process. So you have 1 board member just says, "Put their feet in the ground. I'm against this," but you can go back to their board and see, are you really against this? So there is a process to do that. And there's more to this, but it's explained in here. So I won't linger on this too much longer, but that's the process we currently have for those two documents.
I have a question about that.
Mayor White?
Thank you. I noticed, I know this is an original document, but was it updated when Turner was added? Because I noticed that they're not listed there.
It was not.
So interesting. Okay, that's.
You also notice that the school district isn't part of this process too, even though they were on the original 87 as a member.
Or ODOT.
Or ODOT.
Well, okay, yeah, I didn't notice that one.
It's hard to find a typewriter to update those.
Yeah. I think the original Mediograph maybe is broken. Copy.
If we do update this, we will not be using this font.
Correct, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's proprietary.
Probably. But I think that the bigger question is though, looking at the general purpose governments and then the main transit district that serves this entire MPO area, they're the ones that are, that are going to be hashing this out if we get to a non-unanimous vote situation. And we've had spirited conversations during these different adoption processes over my career, but we've been able to land on a unanimous vote at the end of the day.
Because a commissioner walked out.
That helped. Yes, he did.
Not me.
No,
Never.
What you?
no,
Walked out and let the vote continue.
right, so it was 5 years ago now. It was getting down to one particular objective and how it was worded and so forth. And the Marion County Commissioner at that time felt strongly enough that he did not want to cast a vote in favor. So he left the room, let the vote happen, and then came back in afterwards because that was the only way he could figure out to let things move forward and was not going to hang everything up based on that. So that was his way of expressing how he felt about it on that policy, but did not hang up the whole process and sign whatever needed to be signed at the end of the day. So as I said, it was very spirited.
Chair Clark, I have a question
Yes, Ms. Hanson.
for Mike, maybe. On the amendment, when we added Turner in 2002, it looks like the school district is listed as well. But when was the school district passed? They're not on the original, but then they're on this amendment. So do you know the answer to that?
So in 87, they were listed as a member,
Okay.
but they weren't signatory to the agreement.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so if they're not signed on the 87 one, that means that they didn't sign it, the COG signed it in that version.
Okay.
But then in 2003, when we added Turner, I believe that signatory included.
Okay.
This one.
So they're a voting member. No.
They're a
They're a voting member, yeah.
Okay.
It says that in the original one, one
Okay.
member school district.
Oh, in the original, it says that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Page
And I,
2 of the original one.
okay, and I do want to thank you for providing all this. This was really good. Oh,
Yeah.
It is here. It was really good for me to sit down and like digest this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and in the previous meeting in June or maybe August, we went through a history of this document, including the school district, who was on a transportation formation committee and a similar committee called SATS, even before SKATS came around. So they were one of the originators of the COG board agreement and this transportation agreement. So historically, they've been around in these discussions. So that's why the school district was included in the policy committee. So another issue that has come up, I want to clear this up. So section I of the agreement says the policy committee should review this agreement on or before January 1992. So it was signed in 87. And they said, let's wait 5 years, look at this and see if anything has to be changed. I think it's because, this was new. They had this new flow chart, to see how things went with the unanimous vote. And I think they said, let's wait 5 years and see how it does. This is before I came here in 93. So I don't know if they had that review. And then they say 5 years thereafter and recommend revisions. So they never said we're going to revise it every 5 years. They said we will review it, in 5 year increments. Now, my predecessor and me. We haven't set up formal reviews. We share this document every year with our, as part of our UPWP. And also when I do board orientation, we talk about this document. And the message I've always received is, do you want to review the cooperative agreement? The answer has been pretty certain, no, we don't. It's working okay. We don't need to review it or revise it. It's fine. There hasn't been any motions by anyone that I can ever recall, but it has come up, this year as we're discussing it. Yeah. So let's get to some interesting looking at other MPOs. So there's more in the memo about this, but I try to put things in one table. And here are the MPOs in Oregon. Eugene, Corvallis, Rogue Valley. And you can look at the information. But the takeaway from this is, although we're a one member per jurisdiction and one vote per member, look at the variations for all these MPOs. So like Central Lane has 2 members for the cities of Eugene, Springfield, Maine County, and LTD, their transit district, 1 member for Coburg and ODOT, and then they have 6 ex officio non-voting members. Now, Corvallis has 3 members, or 3 votes for Corvallis. They have 3 members showing up, but they have 3 votes, while the smaller cities have 1 vote and ODOT has 1 vote. And there's a note there that Corvallis is 83% of the MPO population. So similar to us, where we have 1 large city kind of dominating as far as size goes. I'm not going to read through all these things, but you'll note that there's a variety of different representations. There is supermajority voting in Rogue Valley and the Middle Road, and they can't reach a unanimous decision. And then there are a couple that are, Albany's kind of like us, they're 1 vote each member, but their bylaws permit a citizen rep, a business rep, and I understand their chair right now is a business rep. He's not actually an official. So I was looking at our recent information. So takeaway is there are lots of ways boards are set up, even in Oregon, so much variety. And I won't even go into Metro because that would take a half hour to describe.
We'll leave that one.
Yeah, we'll leave that one. And then we did look at some other MPOs in other states. So Springfield, again, where the biggest city has 3 votes, where other members have 1. North Front Range in Colorado, they're very interesting. It goes into detail in the memo, where they have 17 voting members, 1 vote per member. But any voting member can call for a weighted vote on an issue. And the number of weighted votes that every member gets is based on their population, for basically 1 weighted vote per 10,000 population. Spokane in Washington, similar at 21 members, so kind of a large group. Their largest jurisdictions not only have multiple seats. So city of Spokane, city of Spokane Valley, and the county get 2 seats each, where everyone else gets 1 seat. And then they have a blend, so they have more representation just for regular votes. I assume most of their votes are probably regular votes, but can be a call for a weighted vote. It's a whole procedure that's described in the memo, where I think 2 directors have to ask for it and it may be tabled. So there's processes for these weighted votes. And then Sandhill, which is a brand new MPO in 2020, a fairly small one, about 50,000 in North Carolina. They're another example of some very small jurisdictions of 600 and very larger ones, not very large, but 17,000. And 1 vote per member, but they have developed a weighting vote being processed based on population. So at the beginning of the meeting, I was saying there's a lot of variety, and these are the examples that you could look at and ask questions later.
Commissioner Cameron?
Yeah, Mike, it'd be interesting to see the board structures of those that you just referred to here.
It's in the memo. It's in the memo, in which attachment?
The out-of-state?
Attachment C.
Okay, thank you.
There's more details in the memo. I was just trying to make it,
So it's
it's so detailed in the PowerPoint presentation.
So this is, so people who are following online, if you have the online packet, page 54 of 79 of the online packet starts the other MPOs outside Oregon use proportional or weighted voting procedures.
Yeah, so like, for example, there's this table that I pulled right out of the bylaws for Spokane that shows the regular vote of jurisdiction and then the weighted vote by jurisdictions. So we can look at those kind of.
So workforce, right here. Yeah, that's what columns area. Yeah. Any other? Morning.
Do you know if any of the different cities changed their system? They started out one way and then they went through a process and then they changed the voting. What would trigger something like that to say, we're Corvallis, we're gonna start this way, or we're gonna change something because it's.
I can't think of an example that I've come across where an MPO changed it for a specific reason. I imagine there are MPOs that probably have, I just can't think of one that has.
When we're looking at the documents, they don't always say that they were a previous one, so that would require a little bit more digging, and I don't know how we would get that information.
I can tell you that when we tried to find the cooperative agreements for Eugene and Rogue Valley, they said, we can't find them. They're from the 70s or 80s and they haven't updated it so that they can't find the original. They may have changed their bylaws. So sometimes these procedures are written in the cooperative agreement. Other times they are not specified there, but changed in the bylaws, you know, and the agreement says the bylaws will specify voting, et cetera, et cetera. So bylaws are sometimes updated because they're easier, right? You don't take it to the governor. It's less of a you don't have to sign things as long as you have a meeting and there's enough process to update the bylaws.
So a question on that one then, if the cooperative agreement were updated to add a member of jurisdiction, then how the voting process or other procedural processes could be handled exclusively in the bylaws. Is that correct?
You know, if it's specified in the cooperative agreement that says something to the effect of the number of representatives and the voting procedures will be specified in the bylaws. If the agreement said that, then it'd probably be fine to have that in the bylaws and update those bylaws whenever you want to. But if it's in the agreement, then you want to make sure you're not like creating two documents that conflict, right? Which we would have right now if we changed one without changing the other. Our agreement says these are the members. One vote can remove. Okay, so we've had some discussions since starting in June. Back in June, we talked about the census expansion, went over the cooperative agreement, talked a little bit about redesignation and other MPOs, membership and voting. And we had questions for staff. We came back, we answered the people's questions in a question and answer format that some of you may remember. Then we had a lot of committee discussion about a lot of issues, the prominent ones being adding a second Salem member to the board. Councilor Phillips was very active in that discussion. And the whole minutes, we went quite detailed in our minutes describing the discussions, so we'd have it for meetings like this or the future. Like what was discussed, what were some of the opinions expressed at that meeting, so you all have a chance to review that and see what your colleagues said. But kind of the bottom line was there were kind of a split views about the issues and some split views also about whether we should use a facilitated process or not use a facilitated process. So no determination yet about that, about whether we do that or not. And that whole discussion's in attachment B. We were hoping to talk about this in September, but then Councilor Phillips asked to be postponed so that Mayor Hoy can join us. We had some scheduling conflicts in November and January about getting us together, but here we are today in February, talking about it. Last month, we did have a presentation by staff where Councilor Mordhorst asked for a request of showing the projects that we have funded with our discretionary funds over the years by jurisdiction. So we showed some of those numbers. It was like 25 plus years of, so you can see if all this process is working out to where projects are being generally fairly distributed in our jurisdiction. And I have a graphic of that if we want to look at that later on. So I'm coming to the end here. We did get some letters that are in the packet from Friends of Feburary County and Piccoon. Thank you. Some emails, and then just recently the Salem Transit District discussed a letter, and the board approved the letter that we got the other day. That should be on the table. That's not in your packet because we didn't, this went out Tuesday, but on everyone's table. Teresa, that was distributed there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's the Transit District's letter.
Mike, where's the letter from City of Amsoil?
It's attached.
Okay, it's in here.
It's just not.
Okay, it's not, because that's not listed.
Yeah, it's attachment F here.
Okay.
No, the issue of a facilitated process has been brought up, and staff back in June did gather the names and talk to a few facilitators from different types, just in preparation in case we want to continue this. Haven't done anything since really July about that. And we might be discussing facilitation today, but I think that might be a better discussion until after we at least look at those options and attachment A. So I know we're going to get to attachment A, which is kind of our straw man options. I wanted to take a breath here and see if the committee had questions just about all the things I've done to kind of set the table for this discussion. So Chair, I'll throw it back to you. Just let you know, I do have some more slides about attachment A after this.
Okay. Excellent. And thank you. That was very comprehensive. So we are all operating on the same. All right, questions thus far? Dr. Carney.
Thank you, Chair Clark. We were talking about the different MPO structures, and I'm sorry, I don't have the full packet in front of me because my computer gave up after a long morning.
Do you have any more printouts?
There should be one on the table. That'd be great. I'll go grab one in just a second. I know that general purpose governments are voting members of our MPO. And I know that transit is required to be a member, but as we saw in one of your examples, maybe not a voting member. Are voting members from our general purpose governments required to be elected or public officials? I feel like I'm like conjuring this from somewhere in the reading from the multiple memos and things that staff has put together.
Let me bring your attention to the regulations which are attachment E, and specifically attachment E2. It's about 2/3 in your packet.
Yeah.
So you get to that page. It looks like some regulations on that. Federal highway.
Is there anyone that needs another copy? I can run another copy.
All right.
Yeah. So E2 is actually the regulations. There's something on the backside about the law, but this goes into all the regulations about MPO boards. If you look at D, structure, so D1 says MPOs shall consist of local elected officials. So I answer your questions about local elected officials. Other public agencies that administer or operate major modes of transportation in the metropolitan area, including representation by providers of public transportation and appropriate state officials. So those are the required members. Now, as I showed before, they can go beyond that. They can add ports, they can add citizens, school districts.
And those could be voting members, but you start with your local elected officials. But it isn't limited to, it's like including but not limited to.
That's the thing, the federal laws don't say, you know, what you can't have, it says what you must have.
Okay.
As a minimum.
Okay,
right?
yep.
Washington State has something in state statute that says the tribes have to be part of MPOs.
Mhm.
So,
And we have had some conversation around that, through this process as well. The tribes are represented, well, the Grand Ronde tribe is represented on our act. And the Slut tribe is represented on the Cascades West Act, or is that the,
I'm not sure.
yeah, they're on one of the other, probably, yeah. Right, but the acts are separate. The area commission,
Remind us what
the area commission is for transportation, these are under state, not federal. So the MPO is federal, the acts are state. And the MPO, we have jurisdiction over the allocation of project dollars. The act wishes we did. We used to.
Sorry, Trent.
Yeah, we used to. but we didn't. Which is another conversation that we are having at the area commission of transportation. But that's for another day. Let's get back to what we're talking about here. Any other additional questions or comments on what's been discussed thus far?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may.
Commissioner?
I think Mike supplied the history of projects. I have the 24 through 29 tip forecast projects that are in that. I just like to hand that out so everybody just make sure you know what we've said is moving forward from an equitable direction and who's getting what money. So just wanted to add that to the record.
So is that from our tip officially or? You have to tip at the tables from our website.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
So we update these tables, or Steve updates these tables, so that's the most recent table.
It's probably been updated since I printed this out.
Yeah, that's so last year, Commissioner.
Hey, I'm a year older.
We're all feeling that one. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I do have some, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I do have some questions about this as I was trying to get answers from my staff. And they were going, well, I don't know, but if you look at the columns on this, what's the air status quality when it says air quality status exempt or not exempt? That column?
Yeah, sure. So if it's an exempt project, we do not have to do a redo our air quality conformity determination. When it is a non-exempt project, that would mean that the MPO would go through the air quality conformity process again, and there's some type, I haven't been through it myself actually, but there's some analysis that takes place and then some partnership with EPA.
But basically, air quality conformity determination now is just we talk with the air quality agencies, EPA, DEQ, ODOT, and basically, we used to do modeling, we don't have to do that anymore. Currently exempt means, well, non-exempt are roadway capacity projects. Exempt are everything else. So because a exempt project would not increase the air quality, would not.
Yeah, got it. So what would adding turn lanes trigger
Generally,
making it non-exempt?
um,
You're adding bike lanes, sidewalks, and turn lanes, but not lane capacity.
not lane capacity, right? If you add lane capacity, it is non-exempt. It would be adding air quality. Turn lanes.
No, that's what I'm saying. You're not adding any on a project.
Oh, you're not.
I'm pretty sure turn lanes trigger air quality analysis because you're adding capacity.
You're adding capacity.
Yes,
I was going to, yeah,
I'm just pulling that out of my DEQ days,
yeah,
like 15 years ago, but I feel like.
I bow to your DEQ.
I mean, a good example is when the further widening of I-5 south of Cleveland was finally funded. We had to go through because conformity.
Because you're adding a whole nother lane. I get that. I'm curious as the tipping point when you're.
Right, and there are tables that I can send to you that say which ones are exempt and which are not. And so, turn lanes aren't, but there are other ones that are. So there, and there's a nuance there that requires a table instead of memorizing.
Thank you for the technical answer that we still don't have the answer. I appreciate that. Thank you.
The thing is,
And then just to follow up on that question, thank you, Commissioner. So like, tying it to something that's real world, like McGilchrist is getting improvement, and it's not adding lanes, but it is adding, those turn lanes and intersection of bicycle lanes. So is that an example of something that does? If we can tie it to like, examples in our area, that would be helpful.
It was part of the long range plan and the tip, so I don't.
It's not exempt.
yeah.
I don't remember.
Projects like that, I'm curious. Yeah, you're moving traffic, it's not sitting idle,
Yeah, so generally,
Anytime we have a new tip or a new plan, we still have to do conformity for that new.
got it.
And just so folks know what the air quality conformity designation is, what are we conforming on what things?
carbon monoxide.
Thank you. So when we talk about air quality, people have different definitions in their heads, so it's really important for all of us to understand, we're talking about carbon monoxide, what an oldie but goodie. And we're also talking about, are we also talking about particulates?
We're not
Not doing.
Not in our area.
not in our.
Okay, so want to make sure we're really clear on that. That is what that requirement is. Richard,
I'm
Duncan.
so sorry. I think I missed. What is the relation to the facilitator process? I think I missed a key component. I missed the jump. How did we get to air quality?
Well,
Is the question from,
It's,
Unrelated.
you have to look at me, I always do stuff like that.
I legitimately was I just got a little lost and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something important. I'm sorry.
no, that's a good
No,
question.
Okay.
I've been studying, and then the more I study, the more questions I have.
Yep, so this is on the table, one of the columns says air quality status and it's exempt, non-exempt,
Yeah.
where those definitions come from, and it comes from the AQCD, the air quality conformity determination.
I thought that was having some determinant on the facilitator process and I was worried I'd missed something. So thank you.
Okay, no, we're good. All
Oh, I
right.
thought it did.
I'm open to that, clearly. I just needed to understand the connection.
We're coming back now. All right, thank you very much. At this point, so we've heard a lot of the background. We've all reviewed the different options and conversation points. At this time, I would like to press pause and invite the Mayor of Salem and the Mayor of Amsoil to speak about what they have been hearing from their representative, also where they're coming from on this conversation. So I would like to start off with Mayor Hoy to talk to us about the proposal, the conversation starter regarding a second vote. Mayor Hoy.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. And I just want to thank Councilor Phillips for encouraging me, inviting me to be here today. Just to kind of offer another maybe a larger perspective from the city, and really where I'm coming from, and I think Councilor Phillips is coming from, is we saw this opportunity with, we knew Amsoil had, our demographics had changed in terms of our population. Amsoil was going to be likely coming in, and it was a good it just kind of presented itself with an opportunity to take a fresh look at the makeup of this group in terms of the voting power. And we're looking at it strictly from that representation perspective. We don't have any grievances. We're not here because we think we've been wronged. We're not here. It's not a negative thing. It's not any of those things. It's just that this is kind of a fresh look at the way the voting structure is. And we think that it's time that Salem maybe have a little bit more weight in that voting process, just given the population and given the stark differences in population. So that's really my perspective. It's really just and Mayor Clark and I have had multiple conversations. I've had conversations with others about this, how it may not actually change anything, or And it's really not about changing an outcome. It's really just, for me, it's about making sure that the residents of Salem have the basically voting power that we think is due, given the size of the population. So that's really our perspective. We are not tied to a particular outcome. Like, we're not coming here saying we have to have this outcome or we're out of here. We're not saying, we're not coming from that positional place. We just want to make sure that somehow with whatever you all come up with as the members, it somehow reflects our voting power as given the population. So that's my perspective. I don't really have a lot more to say than that, but I'm happy to continue to engage in the conversation and talk about that. But that's really the long and the short of it.
Thank you. Mayor Seha, welcome.
Thank you for having us. I do have a couple questions when we talk about this. Also, we're a rural community, right? We are 4,200 residents, almost 27% under marginalized communities that are represented within our community. And we don't have a lot of resources. So when we talk about going to town, we talk about coming to Salem. Anyone all the way up to Gates will say, I need to run into town. They don't mean Staten, they don't mean Silverton, they mean town, which is Salem. We have a bus system that people can't use to get to and from work. It's just not feasible. Della has a perfect story of how that's impractical. The questions I have are, how many of the schools on this board from Salem-Keizer School District are in Salem? You know?
All
but 11.
Or no, how many schools do you have?
Well, we've got one in Keizer, we have the one high school, 2 middle schools, and I think 7 elementary.
Oh, okay.
And some might be outside the city limits, but within the urban growth
Within the
boundary.
range. Okay.
And interestingly, we also have a portion of Cascade School District in our city.
A little bit of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
No schools, though.
how
No
many,
schools.
no schools, just the district?
Yeah.
And how many bus routes represented here are in Salem?
Gosh, I turn to Shofi for our fixed route service. Everything is inside the urban growth boundary, but includes Keizer and unincorporated Marion County. Our regional service extends.
But I'm asking about the majority, the majority of the routes, where are they at? Are they in Salem?
Within the urban growth boundary, Salem-Keizer. and
We're
within
required, that's where our
unincorporated Marion
service
County.
is
Yeah.
required to be provided.
So the way that I look at things from my community and representing my community, right? We have faced a lot of challenges and we are happy to be here, right? We didn't ask to be here. Onzo is growing. I think that if Oregon is going to move forward, our communities are better off working together. The way that I see it is Salem already has vested interest on this board. We have Salem-Keizer School Districts. The majority of the schools are represented in Salem. The majority of the public transportation is already invested in Salem. So we are invited to the table, but then we're saying we're going to diminish your voice. And that's just the plain truth, how we feel in our community. So how are we as community leaders going to work together when we're invited to the table and then asked our voices to be diminished? When there's already a strong represented voice in Salem. Salem is already getting the majority of the funding on this board. And I'm not saying that it's not deserved, but if we're going to fix Oregon, if we're going to be strong as a county, it starts with regional boards like this, where we're talking about equity versus equality. That is how we feel. That is how our community feels. So that's where we are at. Della has been on this board and participated, and she's very professional. We have never gotten any complaints. I just sat here and listened to the majority of your votes. You guys have all worked together. So why wouldn't that expectation be the same? What will change? Is there a fear of something changing? Are we not going to work together if OMSO comes and has a vote? Has anyone ever struggled on the few times that you guys disagreed. You said you were able to reach a resolution and be professional. Those are the questions that I have. Stella, do you want to add anything?
No, just that I would like people to understand as we're working toward doing an interchange development project that we have now been told that we don't qualify for any funding except the small city allotment grant.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So we don't have any way to fund projects now. And we're not a member of this board, so we can't submit projects or do anything. We're in la la land right now. And that does affect us greatly.
So we do have a vested interest. Our small city allotment will be affected by this board. And we already face challenges with funding. When projects come to the city of Salem, let's take that wastewater treatment facility, right, that we're building out in Almsville. If that were to happen here in Salem, the cost to the residents would be minimal. It would be impactful, but still. But for us in Almsville, they would raise our water bill to $300 because we have fewer residents and we have fewer ways to distribute the fees. Those are the challenges that we face. So thank you, Della, for reminding me about the small city allotment. I forgot about that.
Can I follow up on that? Moving from your status now and then coming on into the MPO, what's that going to do to your small city allotment status?
It doesn't change that until we reach 5,000 citizens.
Okay.
What's changed is that we cannot qualify for any federal funding or anything because we're now in the federal government's eyes a member of this board and it has to come through here. But we're not a member of this board. And until we do, we have no rights from what we understand to submit projects or do anything. And you already have a tip out to 2029. So the first one we could even put a project on would be in 2030. So we now have, for the next 6 years, no funding available to us for any projects other than what our small city allotment allows us.
Just a point of clarification, there is some overlap in the way the tips are developed, so the next tip will be 2027 through 2032. So that would be the next opportunity.
That's what we were told, that we would have to wait until after the current one. So
I'm gonna give you an answer, and I don't know if it's I want to double check my answer. But once Oswald becomes part of in the MPA planning area, then projects that are on the federal classification system, as long as they meet criteria, they can be applied for in our TIP, even if the city is not a member or board.
that's not what was indicated to us in our conversations with other agencies.
Okay, so, and I know that your letter brings up non-transportation issues that I'm not very familiar with, these other kind of projects that the letter talks about. But as far as transportation, if there is a project, that's on a county road in the city of Almsville, that, let's say the county applied for it, and then this is after the planning area boundary is adopted. The county can bring that and say, we want to fund this in the TIP, as long as it met various criteria, as long as, the prioritization process, there's a lot of steps to go through. But I don't think a project on the road in Almsville is disqualified at the moment for the next TIP, right? But there's a lot of projects people want to do, so it would be
I understand.
put into the mix of proposed projects. But so there's two things. One is in the boundary and eligible projects. And then the second part is also officially being a member of the board. And that takes everything we talked about, updating our cooperative agreement, just like we did for Turner. We simply added them we amended our cooperative agreement, said they're on the board. They applied for projects, they got projects funded on Delaney Road and also 3rd Street where the turn is. So there was that process happening for Turner back in the early 2000s.
And those projects are just now.
Yeah, we also got a state grant back then for Delaney Road. Part of that project was funded by a state grant.
I'll call on Director Tracy.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I really appreciate the comments that were shared by both mayors. And I just wanna just kind of like share in the ask for the facilitated process, I think, is for us to be able to like take all those individual pieces and concerns and share them and reach an agreement that would benefit all of us. I mean, like, if I just had like the little magic wand that could solve everything, then like honestly, I think it would be great to go with option 2, where we like include Almsville. The city of Salem has a second voting. And I mean, I would even go even further if we wanted to, but I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds about this, is like to have some sort of like rotating representation for some of us that like aren't part of like the actual cooperative agreement. Like I think it's great that the school district has a voice and like a vote at this table, but I also like don't want to hinder some of like the plans that come forward to support all of our communities, Marion County, Polk County, et cetera. And if I could add in just like my 2 cents onto like why I support the ask of having like a second voting seat for the city of Salem, is just that like, I mean, all the respect to Counselor Phillips. I think you're a great person, but I mean, like, I am literally on the other side of the city from you. I am equidistant from you as I am to Almsville and Turner. And I just think it's a little unfair to ask one Salem city councilor to represent such a large demographic. And a lot of you folks get some really close one-on-one interactions with your communities because of the size. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that the city of Salem should be able to show that same deference to their population.
Thank you, Director. Mayor Hoy?
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to not respond to, but just kind of add additional perspective based on what Mayor Say had to say. I want to be really clear. We don't object to Almsville coming in. We're not suggesting that. We're not suggesting that. I think it's great. I agree. We're all better off the more we work together, no matter what. And just like you don't want your residents' voices to be diminished, I don't want my residents' voices to be diminished. And if we just add Almsville and don't change the structure, then I feel like, so right now it's already very lopsided. We have the same vote as everybody. 175,000 people have the same vote. We had another vote that's just going to diminish the impact of our residents with one more vote. And so that I just want to make sure that we don't do that, and figure out a way that we can have a just fair and balanced representation and a process. And that's all. So.
Thank you. Actually, Commissioner, I'd like to go to Mayor Horning, who can weigh in, especially as another small city.
Well, and I truly appreciate the comments too. The part of my notes here, I mean, Mayor Hoy actually admitted that there hasn't been any harm. I mean, projects get done. And so for me, just even to think through the process, because I've been a member of this committee a lot less than a lot of you in the room here. And to me, equitable is it fair and impartial? Well, this group, as far as I've seen since I've been here, they've been fair and impartial. Whether it's 1 vote or 2 votes, it's always fair and impartial. I mean, we bounce through the same process on every decision we're talking about. And then proportional, I guess there's a lot of definitions for proportional, but I look at proportional as the money that's been allocated, and proportionally, it feels like Salem's got their share. And so my question is, if there's been no harm done to any of the entities in here, why are we considering a change? Because if we're making decisions equitably and proportionally, that the bigger municipalities get the bulk of the money, what would change that if we added 1 more vote? And whether it's, when you're talking about proportional with the size of Salem, I can understand that, but this body has taken that into account all these years. I mean, that's just my opinion, my observation. I mean, if you ask yourself to say, has anybody been harmed with the current process? We vote, we talk about different topics, we talk about the environmental, the exempt or non-exempt, those kind of conversations are in everything we decide our money. And so if the city had 1 vote, Almsville had 1 vote, why would that change going forward? I mean, having a non-voting member, if you want more voices for Salem, put 3 or 4 people on there for the different parts of town just to talk about their neighborhoods. But as far as the voting, we're trying to change something that's working, as far as I can tell, it's fine.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Cameron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just listening to the discussion, I want to make sure that everybody knows I represent 98.6% of the populations we're talking about. I don't represent Polk County.
But not here,
What?
but not here, not on the MPO.
Oh, I do. Yeah. And I want to make that really clear. Because if there's a project that's going on Center Street, Mayor, when you and I had this conversation years ago about we need to get sidewalks and turn lanes in an area that was in the unincorporated area, which does what for the city of Salem? It improves the citizens going back and forth. It helps our school district. It helps Chariots. It helps everybody that's sitting at this table. So I just hesitate to take something that's been working when you have people around this table that have been so big picture oriented, whether it's Polk County or Turner or Salem and now Almsville. I think we should just keep going on the way it is. I mean, that is important. And when you talk about populations, if the city of Salem has 175,000 people you represent, how many people does Chariots represent? The number that's riding the bus every day?
Well, the buses go to every jurisdiction involved.
Okay, so there's that issue too. So
Yeah.
and I think the mayor brought up a good point. The buses are pretty much within the urban growth boundary. And just so you know, the urban growth boundary site, Keizer's connected here. So the Salem-Keizer School District, should we add Cascade School District and rotate that vote? And I think the director had a good point. Is that something that we should look at? Because Cascade School District is out there and they're driving buses everywhere. So I think it's worked. I understand Councilor Phillips' concern, but he's been a good member participating and it's been working. I filled in a few times for Sam when Sam was on this board and it worked then. It's still working and I don't see why we would want to change that.
We'll go to Director Carney.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I would say, first of all, it is a privilege to be in this room. It is a privilege to be able to take time away from my full-time job for a middle of the day lunch meeting. In many cases, we rely on privilege to provide our communities with service. We rely on people who can volunteer. I don't know if I were to take anything away from former council member Anderson's weekly reports, up to 40 hours a week volunteering for the Salem City Council. Our mayor is a volunteer. Commissioner Cameron, you're paid to be here as your responsible, in your role as a county commissioner. And thank you for your service, but I'm also glad you get a paycheck. I wish that all of our elected and appointed officials received a paycheck, because I think that the fact that we aren't able to compensate people for that time limits the perspectives we hear from. And so I'm using my privilege to say, I wish that we could hear from those people and those voices in this body. And I think one way that we can do it, if it is rural transportation issues, if it is people who work for hourly wages in 24-hour-a-day service industry jobs that are not well provided for by public transportation, if it is people without sidewalks that can't walk their kids to school, or people without access to private vehicles, we don't have that voice in this room. And I think it is a detriment to our communities and the way that we are investing funding. And because this is the way it has always been, this is the way we have continued to invest. And we are investing in ways that work for people in the room. There's no denying that. We've got broad agreement that this works for people in the room. But there's a lot of people that aren't in this room. And that's what I think when I look at the changes to federal statute, law, what do we call it, code? And I see equitable and proportional, sure, like that just makes sense. We look down the list of Portland, Eugene, Corvallis, Bend, they're all doing it, right? Proportional, that's easy. We can figure out how to do that. I'm more interested in the shift I'm seeing at a federal level, at a state level, at a local level, and hopefully here to more equitable representation on this body. And I think the facilitated process, an inclusive facilitated process that invites the community to join us. Lord, maybe we have to meet after work when people can come. I don't know. I'm willing to do that work on behalf of this community because I want the outcomes that I think will function best for all of us. And I can respect that we can all get along in this room and agree with decisions and like each other and make what we think are wise choices for our community. But I can't tell you what a person without access to a car and 2 kids at home who might need to get to work or might not have the opportunity to work. I can't really tell you about those challenges.
I can tell you what it's like to live in Onslow. I have been without a car for 9 months because I didn't have $10,000 to drop into a new engine. I have a kid in college who's doing a fire program and I have to share my car with her. So what do? Right? I was really fortunate enough that my husband's boss let me borrow one of his work engines for 9 months. Who has that opportunity in rural communities? There is no bus to get my children to and from Salem, where all the jobs are at. So, as elected officials, we are unpaid. Kevin is elected to represent his community. He's a voice. So the voices are at this table. I am not paid. I am here on my own personal time. Della is retired. She is not paid. Steve is not paid. We are elected officials to represent the communities. We were voted in by the people to sit here. The voices are here. Salem has more opportunities and more resources than rural communities do. We are losing something by being here, and to diminish a vote would be detrimental to rural communities. That is my point. That is my argument. So, literally 8 months without a car with a teenager. If that were to happen here in Salem, they could go to school. They can go to Shemika, right? She has a job at Dutch Brothers. How do I get her there? How do I get my husband back in his work truck all the way on the other side of Independence with 1 car and 3 adults? The means are here in town, not in rural communities. That is what I'm trying to communicate. As small rural communities, we have less resources when we should be working together because we're coming to Salem, we're coming to Keizer to get our needs met. And we need roads and transportations and projects to be able to continue to do that. So why do our people matter less? Because we're less, right? We have less people. That's what I'm hearing. And correct me if I'm wrong. You are, okay. So I hear Salem has more people, so you need more votes. You have more resources. We don't. We're here on a regional board to make regional decisions that have been working. I've seen the work this board has done, and it's done good work. So what's different?
I think, member Enohos Pressy, or do we call you director here? I get a little bit sideways with the titles. I think she represented the issue very well, talking about the opportunity for some of our smaller jurisdictions to have intimate relationships with both their local issues and with the citizen, with the residents in that community, and the power and strength in that. And likewise, the challenge that Councilmember Phillips has, trying to have that same opportunity to represent 175,535 people. It's just, it's not that we are saying a rural voice matters less. We are saying the 175,535 residents of Salem matter as much. And traditionally, the voting structure for this body has said, no, they don't. 175,535 Salem residents only matter, they matter as much as the 3,845
4,200
residents of Polk County. The 4,248 members, right? So we are asking a single MPO member to represent just a huge number of residents and a huge number of issues. And like you said, a huge number of resources, a huge number of intersections, a huge number of roads, a huge number of problems. And bringing more proportional representation to the voting structure could begin to ameliorate some of the challenge of asking a single individual to adequately represent almost 200,000 people. It's not saying rural voices don't matter. It's not saying rural problems aren't problems and that we don't want to hear about them and that we're not going to do something to address them as a group cooperatively and thoughtfully. It's saying one person cannot adequately represent 175,535 people. That's not a fair ask.
And I'm saying that you already have three vested places. You have the school district, and you have Chariots, and you have the city of Salem.
Then you have a
That's my
county
opinion,
commissioner
Mayor.
that is voted by them. And, you know, city, you're gonna say that I only represent the, oh, sorry, Madam Chair.
I appreciate your
Yes, sir.
follow-up on the in this very important conversation, but I do see that Councilor Phillips did put his
Yeah,
hand up,
sorry.
so if I may, I want to go ahead and call on him. It's harder when he's not in the room. Councilor Phillips?
Thank you for making hybrid available. It really helps. And thank you, Chair, Councilor Phillips, City of Salem, appointed member. Thank you, Mayor Hoy, for being here today. It's really helpful to have you here. And thank you, Mayor Seha, for your comments. I mean, it's not just that I can't adequately do the work, like I try, but I minored in math in college, and the city of Salem has never been opposed to adding Almsville. Why are the members opposed to Salem getting one additional vote? That's the only thing that we've asked for, is just if we're bringing in a new member as a voting member, because we are the equivalent of 42 Almsvilles, or 3.4 unincorporated Marion counties, or 4.6 Keizers, why can't we just get one more vote? I mean, there are unique stories across our diverse city of Salem. I guarantee you there are people with similar issues not having transportation to where they need to go, and they're not being adequately represented by just having one person on this body. So we've never been opposed to adding Almsville. Our question would just be, why are you opposed to us, the 65% general purpose government with 65% of the population, just getting one more vote? So it's the issue of kind of furthering that disproportionality that I have concerns about, you know, being an alternate and now a voting member for about 3 years on this body. It makes me nervous. It doesn't kind of follow mathematically. I think there's a new emphasis at the federal level to look at proportionality. I think we may have some disagreements as a body, but I think this conversation would be different if we already had, you know, a more proportional voting structure. I think it would be easier to just go to a facilitated process. You know, we might be able to insist on that. And then at the end of a facilitated process, if it's like, nah, it's just best to do, everybody gets a vote, there'll be 9 members, I would probably accept it at that point. But without a facilitated process, I can't see us having a continuation of that, what we view as disproportional structure. I mean, we are 65%. As I said before, we're 42 Almsvilles. We're, you know, 3.4 unincorporated Marion counties, and we're 4.6 Keizers. Like, that's just, it's a lot. It's different. We're bigger than everybody else put together, plus some. So in terms of the general purpose obligation, you know, stuff that we have to do, which is unique. I understand that people are of the view that the school board is another vote for Salem, and that the transit district is another, you know, vote for Salem. That's not how that works. They're not general purpose governments. While we may be at times in our body's histories somewhat aligned, that has not always been the case. So I do think, you know, I'm just trying to represent this position that I hold, you know, technically speaking, to the best of its ability. And I'm still compelled to say, I don't think it's okay to just add Almsville as a voting member. I mean, if we want to, you know, add them now as a non-voting member, but to ensure that they have no delay to being able to apply for projects, make motions, ask questions with all the other rights, I'm fine with that. I would accept it. I would like us to move to the straw man. I mean, I'm not okay with just number 1. I've always been okay with number 2. I have some questions about number 3. I might be okay with that, but I want number 2 in terms of the numbered options in the straw man list to be looked at. I don't think just doing 4 is okay. And then I guess, you know, 6, my version of 6 is, you know, adding Almsville now as a non-voting member. I'm fine with that now. But it's that furthering of the disproportionality. And I get it. Like, I now have a better understanding of why this is a bigger ask. I have met with, you know, many of you about this topic, and I understand that I'm asking for change. But, you know, we're here because of the census update. I don't think this issue is going to go away. It'll come back in 10 years. There are communities, you know, in other places that have MPOs that have, you know, smaller population groups or smaller cities that don't have voting members, that have different structures where they rotate. I'm interested in all of those options, but I'm just trying to fulfill this role as the way that I've been appointed to do it to the best of my ability. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Counselor.
He's been ahead of me. I do have a specific question.
Oh, you put your name. I remember that in some places too, and so does Director Carney. So you had a direct follow-up to Counselor Phillips' comments?
Yes.
So if, with the movement of the group, let Mayor Horning continue that conversation.
Councilor Phillips, if you would have had 2 votes over the last 20 years, what would have been different? You talk about adding representation, voting representation versus just representation. What would have been different over with the majority of the money have been distributed as what appears to be appropriately? What would be different?
I mean, again, this conversation now is the biggest thing. So it's not a money question. I don't have a clear answer to like, oh, this one project needed to be different. I mean, we may have had a very different conversation about, you know, the Salem River crossing, which ultimately didn't pan out. I mean, we do at some point need another route across the river, but I'm just saying that conversation could have gone differently. You know, and right now, like this structure conversation, in my opinion, we're kind of close to an impasse in terms of finding a way forward. So this conversation would be different right now. But I still appreciate the question. we have all tried, and I commend us all, and I appreciate everybody's service. I now have a very acute awareness of what this takes to do in terms of showing up and, you know, being here as a civics leader. But I don't have a specific one project would be different. But that doesn't mean that this isn't an important conversation. And I'm not here just for the sake of being here. I don't like confrontation that much. I'm here because I think that this position that I have is worth exploring. And so I'm looking for a way forward that gets a consensus of us.
Director Carney?
Thank you, Chair Clark.
Okay, and then, all right. Yeah.
I just was, I wanted to, it's not a direct follow-up, but I was very inspired by some of the slides, I think, or maybe it was in the packet that staff put together, talking about more inclusive MPO, like representation in general. I think voting or non-voting, we would benefit from hearing from additional seats. I don't know if that needs to be considered as part of this conversation, but we kind of keep coming back to 9, and I would like to hear from a greater diversity of voices when we are considering the things that we consider and the investments that we consider. And I think that this table is really mind-blowing. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, page 2 and attachment A, and I think this is the straw man.
Well, I haven't had a chance to actually present this straw man.
Oh.
stuff, but,
And I'll wind that up.
We'll go moving around the table. Commissioner Mordhorst.
So although I only have 3,800 people within the Salem urban growth boundaries, I'm elected to represent 92,000. So even though rural lies around Salem, we all recognize that Salem is the hub that keeps our whole Willamette Valley moving. So everybody that represents the outside sources of this group is looking at the greater need of Salem to keep it economically viable. Most of our residents work in Salem, or they pass through Salem to get to their jobs. All of our farmers bring their fresh markets to the canneries, which are in Salem or through Salem. The Oregon coast is bringing all of their goods through Salem to get to I-5. So we're not only looking at pedestrian and bicycle pathways and transit, we are looking at how we get people from 30 miles away to work. We have Falls City as a very low depressed area that has absolutely no transportation at this time. And Chariots was looking one time and refused to provide services there. That is an area they have a grocery store, but the pricing is about 40% higher than Safeway is in Dallas. And most all of them have one car, so dad takes it to work or mom takes it to work, whoever happens to have the job, and the others stay home with the kids. Trying to get to a dental appointment or a doctor's appointment is almost impossible. So family community outreach, we have rides and volunteers that will go and get these people in hardships to oversee this, but that's the challenges of rural county. We have probably 10% of our new population that you see building houses in Dallas and Independence are commuting to Salem or even to Portland or Wilsonville now to work. And Woodburn is becoming a huge employer. They've got to get through Salem. So keeping the roads up to date and reducing the bottlenecks is a key structure. But as a group, we all take a look at that and discuss those challenges, and we look at our tips. And you see the majority of all of this stuff's a tip. So Mike, if you have that visual I asked you to do for the dispersion of money for the 25 years, can you put that up on that screen? So we all understand the concerns the city of Salem has, but yet at the same time, we are all in agreement that we need to keep this city moving and going forward. So we understand, and you look at all of the new projects, we are including bicycle and transit. Everything is being considered and talked about at all of the meetings. And when we're staying with ODOT, it's all requirements that we have to address. to get any project moving forward. So again, even though it is in the city of Salem, we're all regionally owned. So I hear the biggest thing is adding another vote to water down Salem's vote. And to Maria Hills-Pressey's comment, the school district is not a required voting member on this group. They could be a non-voting member, so we could keep and maintain their input and thoughts and listen to their concerns. But we could take their vote and give it to Almsville as a voting member. That way, all general government groups will stay as voting members and special districts. And they would stay on as a non-voting member. We don't increase the numbers, we don't water down the vote, it still stays at 8. Has anybody considered anything like that?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Being able to be here.
Good luck on the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being here. I see Director Hills-Pressey's hands up, and then I'll weigh in. Director?
Thank you, Chair Clark. I think to the commissioner's point, I mean, I agree. I think that's why it would be nice to have kind of like a facilitated process where we could put all of these options on the table, where it's like, maybe a governmental entity like the Salem-Keizer School District could be rotated or participating in like a non-voting capacity, things like that. But it's really kind of hard. I think we've put a really big ask onto staff, and I think that staff has done a really amazing job at providing us history and information and background, but it's also a little like a chicken egg sort of situation, because we make suggestions, they come back, and then we're like, well, what about this? Which is why the intent behind a facilitated process could help us just put absolutely everything on the table, and they could help us potentially line up to a place where we could all come to a very solid agreement. I also just wanted to flag Chair Clark, I have a hard stop at 2, so I'm gonna need to hop off soon.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've been listening to this conversation. I've talked with many of you about this, listened a great deal. From the city of Keizer point of view, number one, by far and away, before we do anything else, is get Almsville taken care of. We heard from the mayor. This is hurting one of our own. A city here that needs to be able to be at the table, to be able to get their projects through, to be able to be in the planning. And from Keizer's point of view, similar to my predecessor, way back in the day when Turner was being brought on, my predecessor went to the mat to make sure that as quickly as possible, Turner got brought on. This is not something that Turner asked for, this is not something Almsville asked for, but because we are here, because of the federal regulations and the requirements, that this be done post haste. Because not doing so is harming one of our own, one of our neighbors. And that's not okay with Keizer. So to me, that is job one. However that gets done, and then however we want to deal with additional conversation around representation and so forth. I've said to many of you, and I will say it again for the record, this is a game where the game is made up and the points don't matter. Because to Mayor Horning's point, and to the data that we saw, the allocation of resources to do the improvements to our roadways have been comprehensive. They've been with an eye toward full urban upgrades to make sure that we are facilitating all modes of transportation being available to all of our residents. If it's not complete, it's not an option. I felt that way about transit, and I was delighted when they finally got to 7-day a week, because by not being complete, it was not an option. Now I see people standing at the bus stops every day of the week, because now it is an option for people within the UGB. So from Kaiser's point of view, the benefit to us is well, the priority for us is to get Amsoil taken care of. From the steps from there, yes, we're the second largest city in Marion County. We're getting what is proportional for the projects that are in our transportation system plan. But I'm going to push back on a comment that was made about the projects that we're bringing to the table. Our transportation system plan was developed by the people of Keizer, all the people of Keizer. I am carrying that plan on behalf of all the people of Keizer. My neighbors who have one car or have no car, my neighbors who have kids in school or are retired or can't drive, a family member that cannot drive and is reliant upon being able to walk, ride her bike, or to use transit to get to wherever she's going to go. So yes, when I sit here, I represent our transportation system plan, which represents my entire community. Make no mistake about that. So I want to make that really clear. That's where Keizer stands on this issue. And, you know, if people want to move with something other than, you know, whatever happens with Salem's vote, but anything that does not bring Amsoil in as a voting member post haste, Keizer will not support. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair and Mayor. I appreciate your work on behalf of all Keizer. As mayor, you definitely represent your entire city. And I do my best to represent the entire city of Salem. But with our ward structure, I don't know that I do my best, but it's hard. We have 8 wards. So I'm prepared to support a motion to officially bring Amsoil on in an ex officio status to be able to make motions, apply for projects. I am not prepared to vote yes on a motion to bring them on as a full voting member without us, the city of Salem general purpose government, getting an additional vote. I do want to hear from staff in terms of the genuine fear and concern that our electeds from Amsoil have about their perception that they can't currently apply for projects. I want to make sure that we're not actively delaying anything. And I don't know that I have that technical answer. I think I heard them say they need to double check. So I may prefer that we not vote on this until next month or when we can get that answered.
Mike?
Yeah, the mayor that came from Ron Harding on behalf of the city had one paragraph, this is the second to the last paragraph, that says Amsoil loses eligibility for other funding opportunities that are targeted to fill the disadvantaged and small communities face, like the rural development funding. So, I probably want to talk to, Ron Harding to really understand that and make sure that that's accurate and what relevancy it has in this discussion. I'm just not aware of what that is. The fact that they're now part of in an urbanized area, whether that kicks them out of certain funding, that sounds like what it is to me. So I don't know. I'm sure other jurisdictions have gone through this process where they are part of an urbanized area. I mean, we're not part of an urbanized area and now are. In the north part of our county, the cities of Aurora and who am I forgetting?
Donald.
Hubbard.
Not Donald, Hubbard.
Hubbard.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know all about this.
Yeah, so we're now part of their urbanized area. It never came up in those discussions and those meetings that I attended, that there were those kind of ramifications of losing eligibility. So it's something I have to learn more about. But I think the other thing I said I needed to check maybe with Federal Highway or ODOT staff is, my current thinking is that I don't see a issue with Amsoil bringing a project or Marion County bringing a project on behalf of Amsoil if the county is the owner of the road to be a considered project for the next rounds of funding. No guarantees, but considered. So those are kind of 2 separate issues in my mind. Bringing projects forward, because once you're in the planning area, you should be able to bring projects forward. But it's a separate question is board membership and voting. So hope I've made that clear. In my mind, there's that distinction. Can I make a motion? Well, that's up to you, Chair. We haven't even talked about these straw votes, so.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think because it is 2:00 and I would suggest that my motion would be to go away and think about this and let staff answer some of those questions that just got asked about funding for Bronxville. And what we think. That's just my thought.
So to bring back the straw man proposals that are included in the packet and talk through them next month. And
I
then,
would second that motion to table this and bring it back next month.
that was the motion.
If it was a motion, I apologize.
So moved.
Can I add a couple of things, Chair? And I hope I'm not interrupting your thought process, but there was a lot of discussion about the facilitated process. I mentioned we looked at it, but kind of postponed any further stuff. I could continue to look into that idea and contact some of these areas too. And also an idea I was talking to staff, if we had a facilitated process, what participation would the board want in selecting the facilitator, things like that. So there's those issues are in my mind just to move us forward, in addition to the things you just talked about.
Mike, and I'm going to speak from Kaja's point of view again, is my concern is that, what is this going to do for Almsville? Is this going to protract this to the point where it is not going to help Almsville get the vote and representation that as a member of this board? We had the same conversation 20 years ago with Turner. So if we're going to facilitate it, then we have all those meetings to set up, and then we have to get the facilitator, and we've got to put that structure together. And I'm having flashbacks to CMAC. That was a whole lot of fun. That was the congestion management air quality process. I see.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I thought that I just heard staff say that with Commissioner Cameron's representation, that the city of Almsville could coordinate with Marion County as a representative and advance projects and issues related to MPO funding through that avenue. And was I mistaken?
What I'm trying to say is that once we have the official planning area established, we're getting closer to that, but it's going to include Almsville, right? Then we can, that's part of our planning area. And as part of our planning area,
Okay.
our plan should reflect the needs in that area, and our transportation improvement program could reflect projects in that area. That's kind of all I'm saying.
Separate
They'd
from
be,
the
they'd
governance.
be eligible to submit it. I'm not guaranteeing anything right away. Turner may be a hopeful exception or goal to say, hey, they joined and they got something within the first 5 or 6 years, whatever it turned out to be.
And pulled away until 2031.
Right.
That's Marion County Road though.
So just want to keep in mind that I'm trying to say that door is open for them to apply for projects, but the board membership is a different issue. And this issue about other opportunities, whether it's rural development funding, I don't know what that would fund specifically, but that's something the staff has to talk to our other departments, maybe with the county as well, better understanding what the ramifications are. So, which I just don't know, unless you have any idea.
Anna, do you have any?
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna need to get that information as quickly as possible because Almsville needs to not be harmed in any sort of delay. And if that is going to be a problem, then we need to take action to make sure that that is not going to.
So can I make a
their
motion?
voice.
And I just wonder if by joining the board, if that changes anything. If they become a board member of SKATS, I have a feeling that won't change anything if it's true that because now they're in the urbanized area, they would be disqualified from some water or other kind of project.
Their voice won't be here.
We won't be here, we won't have a voice.
No.
It's like being invited to the dance and being told not to dance. That's basically.
Well, in the meantime, your voice is here, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I said, I represent a lot of citizens. They all vote.
Yep.
175 in the city of Salem, you too, whatever portion vote, I represent them. Even those that don't vote.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna go down that road of the frustration of people not putting their ballot.
Oh, no, I'm just saying. You have to consider.
So can I make a motion?
Really.
I make a motion to amend cooperative agreement and SKATS bylaws to add Osville as a voting member, identically to what happened to Turner in 2003. And I'm making this motion because I didn't hear one disagreement to say everyone is. Oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, we have to have a second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to, and this is option number 1. Down to Almsville and no other changes. Is that what I heard?
That's what you're.
Okay. Speak to your motion.
And the reason I'm doing that is I haven't heard any argument the other direction that says anyone has been harmed with our current structure. I mean, the processes we've gone, number of votes the cities have had, there is no answer that can say, I've been harmed by the way this process has worked. And so if you have one more vote, why would anybody be harmed?
I believe I spoke to the systemic harm. I'm sorry, you didn't hear me.
So I'm gonna let him finish his statement and I'll go to you. Are we
Yeah,
done? Okay. I'll go to Director Carney. Mike has his up for a piece of information. If you can.
I am concerned, Chair, that on the agenda, the item was never a motion to take any action. The action requested was discussion of the materials and options. So I'm concerned that bringing a motion today and voting on it is not the appropriate process today, because the mayor left it open, that you have representation from the city of Salem. The transit district, I mean, it's the school districts. We still have a quorum, that's true, but that wasn't the action item. So I'm a little concerned about procedures, about voting, taking that kind of motion at this point. It wasn't the agenda that we said we would.
So, and if I may, Carney, and I'd have to review our bylaws and so forth. I know that for the city, what we would do is we would have to have a motion to suspend the rules, take up a matter that was not published on the agenda. This as a motion was not published on the agenda. I'm not sure where that, I know my city rules and how we would proceed at that point. And I appreciate the spirit of this motion to get this moving. But I'm gonna have to agree with Mike that this was not noticed, that we were going to take action on it today. I'm gonna go to Commissioner Cameron.
Sure, just a point of clarification.
Okay.
You don't have to publish every notice or every possible motion that may be acted on. It does say action requested, discussion of materials and options presented in attachment A. And there are motions in attachment A.
Well, the options.
Straw man options.
Straw man options.
I would like, is it possible, could I make a substitute motion or to table this? So that
I'll withdraw my motion based on Mike's comment until next meeting. But my goal is I want to hear something where anybody's been hurt by our current process before I vote for more votes for someone. That's your goal in the next month. I want to hear it.
I will look up systemic racism for you.
That was who you voted on.
I'm sorry, but to say that there has been no indication of anyone being harmed over time by a process of transportation planning. I'm not saying this group. I'm not implicating anyone. But I think by not having voices at the table, representative of communities that have been subject to generate like decades of disinvestment, We're talking like redlining and highway cuts and taking out all of our Black business community in Portland. This is what transportation investments have done.
But that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about.
That is harm. I'm sorry, when you say there
About
is
harm,
no
the
harm.
decision making.
If you're saying no harm at this table, that's one thing.
That's what I'm saying. We're here to vote on the harm for our committee to say, we vote on this, are we equitable? You're saying we're not equitable.
That's true. I agree with.
I mean,
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand
Well, no,
what
it's
you're saying.
equitable and what's it, proportional, you're saying we're not equitable.
Correct. I am saying transportation planning and government as a whole is not doing a good job equitably representing the communities that we have impact on. 100%. And I wish that it weren't so. I wish that we had a better avenues. I wish we could compensate people for participating in these meetings. I wish that we could pay people for their time.
I don't care. I mean, I really don't care about, I don't need to be paid. I raise my hand and not be paid, and so you wish we do that. But to say we're not equitable is kind of a slap in the face of this committee. I mean, the world's not equitable, but we're talking about to say, when we're adding Omsville for a vote, we want to have more votes in Salem. That's not an equitable discussion. You're talking about changing the whole topic and moving in a different direction.
I think that can be part of the conversation, yes.
For how long? I mean, that's a years and years of process. The country hasn't figured
I
that out.
think a facilitated process that allowed for community participation could help open the door to a conversation that moved us in a more productive, equitable direction.
I'm gonna go to,
Just share really quick.
yes,
Are we, if we go to a facilitated discussion, we're talking about bringing in the community? Let's get that cleared up because that's a different, in my opinion, a different process than a facilitated discussion amongst us. So that's kind of what you're saying, Mike. Is that what we've been
Well,
looking at?
that's why I brought up about 10 minutes ago. If we did a facilitated process, yeah, that's why we haven't got further. Who's gonna define what that is? And this committee can have a subcommittee that determines that. It's in our bylaws. It's in our cooperative agreement. We can set up subcommittees and say, what's this process gonna follow? Because this is your process. You can make decisions here around the table, at meetings. You can make, or you could figure out a different process to resolve this obviously very tricky issue and not an easy issue. So I hope this process can go forward where we're not rushing to judgment. Because I think rushing to judgment will leave some people feeling that they lost and will create, hurt feelings. So in my mind, I'm a little concerned about motioning so early. That's why I did not put in anything on the agenda as an action, a motion to pick something yet. I think there's a lot of discussion still has to be done. And today was a good step on that journey to get us where we need to be. So I'm concerned about rushing through things, and I want to get us through this so that everyone feels they've been heard and the options are explored and the process is followed very clearly so that we know going into each meeting what the action may be. So I think that's good governance. I see it in your local governments where you notify what you're going to do, you vote, so the public knows it too.
So point of clarification, so it doesn't have to have every motion, it'll just say action item. What will it say on the agenda?
When we decide on, when we are trying to make a decision about this.
In order for the mayor to make a motion next time, what does it have to say on the agenda?
Think about it, Commissioner, it would probably be something like, action to modify have staff modify we'll start with the process to modify the cooperative agreement and bylaws at Omsville. I don't want to be too specific because I feel like you can take what I'm saying today and say, put that there because.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, I don't think it needs to be specific. I just think it's an action item that we would act on updating the
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And I just feel that this discussion really hasn't kind of had a chance to marinate people's minds about pros and cons. We didn't even go through those straw men. Is there compromise that people can see amongst all those options? And I call them straw men because you don't have to pick one. You can say, I like a little bit of this one, a little of that one, and I hate, this part. So that's the purpose. And I'll tell you one more last thing. I'm not a facilitator. So we as staff are doing the best we can to provide you information and options. But, this kind of discussion may really need a facilitator who's really schooled and versed in getting compromise. And that's what this is all about. We're gonna have to find a compromise amongst the members on this board.
So Mike, I will just say your opening comments, if this goes too fast, some people will feel, what'd you say?
Feel they
Left out
lost or maybe even resentful.
Yeah, and there's members sitting around this table that assume we need to have a compromise and go forward and do this whole process. There's members that are around this table that don't feel that. So it cuts both ways.
So with that, at this point, yeah, we are out of time. So the two decision points that remain are, one, we've all read the straw man proposal, so I think all of us we've given them a lot of thought. I would be surprised if anybody hadn't coming into this conversation, because that's the kind of people everybody around this table are, whatever the proper grammar is. The other is facilitated or not, and I don't think there's agreement on that yet either. But I think one thing that if we do go to facilitated is going to have to be very clearly defined, to Anna's point. So we've got to really understand what that would entail and what it would not. And from my point of view, the timeline. What is going to be the benefit to this organization? What kind of timeline are we looking at? And I want some answers on what this is going to do for AMSO.
With that, and I'll follow up to get that information.
All right, thank you.
Before you're adjourned, we had other things on the agenda. We can postpone those, Steve, the modifications.
It's just, yeah, it's
It's
just.
informational.
So,
So we'll acknowledge those for the record that they were in there.
maybe it should be good for me to meet with the chair and the vice chair, in between meetings, so we can figure out what we would have on the next meeting agenda.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay. All right, with that, the time is 2:19. We are adjourned.
Thank you. I apologize for the hasty exit and late arrival. I have an important meeting.